Coming up, it's relentless. Brand new Brexit bad news stories are still hitting the headlines 7 years after the referendum. Last month, we had Nigel Farrage admitting on the BBC's Newsnight that Brexit has been a failure. And the most recent YouGov survey has shown that there are record levels of British voters that agree with him. Figures quoted in the Financial Times show the number of people thinking the UK was right to leave the bloc dropping to its lowest ever level at just 31%. In a related story that would be hilarious if it wasn't so tragic, the Brexiteers' Bible, the Daily Express, was so incensed by this finding from YouGov that they ran their own survey amongst their own readers. Express.co.uk asked, "Do you think Brexit has been a failure or a success?" They then put away their shotgun and started counting how many toes they had left, as an overwhelming 62% of Daily Express readers, probably the most Brexity demographic in Britain, said that Brexit has been a failure, against 29% who thought it had been a success. Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. It turns out that Express readers split 62 to 29% in favour of seeing Brexit as a failure aren't that different to the wider UK electorate, with a focal data poll for the Observer showing that 3 times as many adults, 63%, now believe that Brexit has created more problems than it has solved, with just 21% who believe it has solved more problems than it has created. Whether that 21% can actually name a single problem that Brexit has solved is another question. The so-called will of the people has never been a more relevant cliché. The Focal Data survey was broken down into geographical areas of the UK and shows a dramatic reversal in opinion towards the EU in areas which overwhelmingly backed Brexit in 2016. In the Eastern European migrant-hating Brexit capital of Boston and Skegness, for example, where the vote to leave the EU was 75% in 2016, more than twice as many people now want closer links with the EU than those who want relations to become more distant. And before I move on from polling onto some of the other Brexit stories this week, just a quick word from 2 of those Express readers who actually responded to the Express poll. I think you'll enjoy them. Express reader Ancy Luman said, "I don't believe people who say they think it hasn't failed. They are just putting on a brave face. How could anyone think that the current situation is satisfactory?" And Valerie Jackson 1 wrote, "Of course Brexit is a failure. It only takes someone with a fraction of a brain to observe the damage it has caused to our economy and the havoc it has played with our businesses, the lifeblood of our nation." A reminder, these are both Express readers. Reality is reaching even those Brexity parts of our society that Brexit bad news doesn't normally reach. Brexit bad news like this article in the American Forbes magazine this week that told us Brexit food trade blocs have cost the UK over £7 billion based on research by the London School of Economics. That's an average increase of £250 per British household on their food bill. While the researchers calculated that the cost of food in the UK has surged by 25% since 2019, they believe this increase would have been reduced by nearly a third, reaching only 17%, if post-Brexit trade restrictions hadn't been in place. General inflation in the UK seems to be dropping slightly now, but food inflation has remained high at 19% over the past year. Recent data from the Office for National Statistics shows the UK having the highest food inflation rate among all industrialised nations. All those nations have suffered from the pandemic and the war in Ukraine, but only one country was on the receiving end of a Brexit.
Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.
In other Brexit news, that £25 million Brexit border post down in Portsmouth continues to act as a monument to the now literally monumental stupidity of Brexit, and specifically one of its major cult members, Jacob Rees-Mogg. The building in Portsmouth still remains unused after the UK government announced in April last year that the introduction of post-Brexit import checks would be delayed for a 4th time. The then Brexit Opportunities Minister, Jacob Rees-Mogg, said this at the time.
An act of self-harm. If we'd gone ahead with it, it would have increased costs for people, and we are trying to reduce costs. So that's the purpose of not going ahead with them and trying to ensure that the border flows as smoothly as possible, which benefits everybody. Free trade is hugely advantageous to consumers.
Yes, you heard that right. Jacob Rees-Mogg, arch-Brexitist and long-time hater of everything EU, was stealing lines from the Remain campaign. He admitted that implementing Brexit in full, honouring the 2016 promise to take back control of Britain's borders, would be
An act of self-harm.
saving the British from £1 billion that they wouldn't have had to spend at all if it wasn't for Brexit in the first place. The trouble is, some of that money was already spent on exactly the type of facility sitting dormant in Portsmouth, and which will likely never be used, as the government has now dropped its commitment to controlling our borders and replaced it with a so-called light touch policy to goods being imported. But Portsmouth's council taxpayers are still footing the bill. This week in Brexit also saw the Australian and New Zealand trade agreements coming into force. Even George Eustace, the former cabinet minister who helped negotiate the trade deal with Australia, has admitted.
And so the first step is to recognise that the Australia trade deal is not actually a very good deal for the UK. It wasn't for lack of trying on my part, but it has to be said that overall, the truth of the matter is that the UK gave away far too much for far too little in return.
The National Farmers Union added, there is little in this deal to benefit British farmers. This will just heap further pressure on British farm businesses already facing serious challenges. And from farming to banking, with the Financial News website this week reporting behind a paywall, unfortunately, that European regulators have started informing the international investment banks on which businesses and staff must move to the continent, starting the clock on Brexit compliance. There are forecast to be thousands of jobs and billions of pounds of business in the banking sector that will move from the Brexit-blighted UK to a country within the European Union. 7 years after the referendum, and Brexit is still the gift that keeps giving. To the EU, that is. And it's not just the banking sector. This week also saw a news item from ITV reporting on a Luton-based bearing manufacturer moving its operations to EU member country Poland, a move that will see the loss of 300 jobs from the UK. The news comes just weeks after the parent company of another major employer in the town, Vauxhall, warned that it may have to move production out of Luton unless the UK's Brexit deal could be changed. After 7 years, the Brexit plot that was designed first and foremost to heal the rift in the Tory party has spectacularly failed to fulfil its main purpose, and the collateral damage has been to create a rift amongst the wider UK population, a rift between the nations that make up the UK, a rift with our friends and neighbours in Europe, and a rift between reality and the reality deniers, those deluded nutters now admitting that Brexit has failed, but only because the EU have plotted against us, or that Remainers have sabotaged it, or it's because of the blob, or because we didn't pray hard enough, or whatever today's excuse is. And of course, Farrage and Rees-Mogg are the Pied Pipers for that particular cult. But it's now clear to a vast majority of the UK population that Brexit is collapsing around us. The only solution is to kick the Tories out at the next election as the very first step, and just hope that Starmer's Labour Party, possibly in a coalition with the Lib Dems, will take steps to at least secure a closer relationship with the EU. Now, I don't have much faith in the centrist Keir Starmer, truth be told, but despite all his failings, I'll take him over any Tory Prime Minister. And I do agree with Starmer that right now a return to the single market or customs union is not even on the table. It's not even possible from the EU's point of view. That's my opinion anyway. Others are available. And on that note, I'd just like to give a shout out to my friend Ben from SMR Pro-European Radio, who now has a YouTube channel called SMR Bite Size that I think you'll find really interesting. I'll put the link down below and it's on the screen now. I'm not sure whether Ben would agree with me, but I think a genuine move back towards membership of the EU will have to wait until midway through Labour's second term, probably around 2030, assuming the Tories don't stage a miraculous electoral recovery for the next few years. That timetable feels genuinely realistic right now, as the full impact of the stupidity of Brexit is beginning to be noticed even by the hard of thinking. By 2030, a debate on EU membership would feel like something new, with everyone in the population aged 32 or less never having had a chance to have their say in the referendum. A significant number of the predominantly older Brexit voting group, with their backward-looking Make Britain Great Again nostalgia-tinted glasses, will have shuffled off this mortal coil, replaced by this new generation of overwhelmingly forward-looking pro-European voters. I can only see a 2030 referendum having one result. It's just a shame that realistically we have at least 7 more years of Brexit fallout to endure.